All right, so if we were to, you imagine yourself sitting in an outdoor cafe, the ice is clinking in the glasses, and I might say, Josh, if engineering were an ice tray, you'd mold ice cubes in the shape of a Volkswagen Beetle.
Welcome to Engineer versus Designer,
The podcast.
For product designers, engineers, and anyone else whom the world is a museum and we are its display. My name is Josh, mechanical engineer of SolidSmack.com.
And my name is Adam, industrial designer of CADjunkie.com. Each week's show is displayed in 3 halves. This week we're talking about design.
How profound.
Yes, but namely the invisible processes behind the world of design.
My engineer hairs are quivering.
First, we'll get a good old fact smack courtesy of SolidSmack.com.
Yep, followed by design process.
Delicious.
Tips, tricks, and insight compliments of CADjunkie.com.
And today we're squeezing the pulse of the Boston design scene, talking with Mr. Sam Aquillano, freelance designer and co-founder and director of Design Museum Boston. And as it turns out, we also have Derek on the line as well, who is the partner on Design Museum Boston as well.
Yep, Sam and Derek, welcome to the show. If you could coat one building in Boston with hummus and eat it, would it be Fenway Park or Frank Gehry's leaky Stata Center at MIT or something else entirely?
Yeah, as much as I love both of those places, it would definitely be something different entirely. I would coat the community rowing boathouse in hummus. If I had to choose hummus, I mean, I'd love to choose like chocolate or something else, but...
Good choice, Sam. Sit tight. We'll be hearing more from you as the show goes on. Speaking of garlic-infused Mediterranean goodness, Josh Mings of SolidSmack.com spread the pita bread of ignorance with the chickpea puree of knowledge. What have you got for us this week?
Yes, this week's SolidSmack Fact Smack is brought to you by Fortis 3D Production Systems. From your office to the factory floor, Fortis offers efficient digital manufacturing solutions for your business. Rock it at Fortis.com.
Rock it.
All right, Sam and Derek, we'll get to the facts in a moment. First, you guys are freelance designers. I want to know more about the tools of the trade that you guys use in this strange profession you call design. What software do you work with on a regular basis?
You know, for the museum, it's Google Docs, without a doubt, and it's the only way we can really collaborate. Overall, it's not the most creative, but our spreadsheets look amazing. They do. In our design work, freelance design work, I use a lot of Illustrator and Rhino myself.
And I'm using a lot of Illustrator and Sketchbook Pro, as well as SolidWorks.
And Sam and Derek, you guys actually make heavy use of your eye devices as well, right? Do you use those for your design work as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we are never more than 2 feet from our iPhones and our iPads, and we do, in all of our meetings, everything. You know, a lot of our meetings end up getting derailed because we're like taking notes right on the iPad, and someone's like, what are you guys doing right now? And then you have to show them, like, here's this app, and then I got this stylus, and they're like, wait, so you don't have a notebook? And we're like, no. And then we can pull up any, like, supportive material for the meeting, like, right then and there, and every time they're sort of, like, dazzled by these eye devices, so they're a huge part of what we do.
Now, Sam, I'm sorry, Sam, I know you're an industrial designer. You might have some engineering background we'll hear about in a minute. Derek, what about you? What do you do? What's your specialty, and where do you come from?
So I'm a product designer by trade as well. I also do a fair amount of illustration work, a lot of which is done on my iPad, incidentally. Yeah. And prior to starting the museum, I worked for Philips Color Kinetics, and I'd worked at Staples prior to that.
Okay, so Sam, you actually had a start in engineering as an intern. What happened there? Were you permanently scarred from the experience?
No, not really. I had one of those very, very cool engineering internships. It was funny, though, that I never actually went to school for engineering, but I got this internship at GE. Hopefully no one is listening, but I think they got really fixated on the word industrial design, the word industrial, because they were like, oh, well, we're doing some industrial things. And I actually spent the summer, working on decommissioned aircraft engines, and they were using them to generate electricity, like in these different sites and sort of in the desert around in Texas.
Wow.
And it was great. It was really fun. I learned a lot about like documenting process and technical drawing. And I think that's ultimately how I got the job, because in high school I did a lot of drafting. And the cool thing, or the crazy thing about drafting at GE was you had to do everything in pen. So it was like no mistakes.
Oh, yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
You know.
And you got to use the right weight. You got to use the right weight of pen as well, the right micron
Oh yeah,
pen.
absolutely. Yeah, I learned the trick very early of the whiteout and then make a photocopy. That was like I think I used the photocopier a lot that summer.
So Derek, what's your favorite project you've ever worked on?
Oh, let's see. So aside from Design Museum Boston, being probably the epitome of everything that I want to do, you know, prior to doing that, I've worked on some projects with Philips Color Kinetics that are used to light up some pretty substantial landmarks around the world. I worked on some stuff that's lighting up the Prudential and Spire Tower, and that's been pretty exciting.
And Sam?
Oh, definitely Design Museum Boston. I mean, that's why when you can choose your job by being entrepreneurial, you better actually like the result, and I really do. But working at Bose Corporation, I had the opportunity to work on some iPod speakers, which were really fun. The fun thing about those projects was that, you know, especially at a company like Bose, where you're not necessarily the user of all the products, because I can't afford a $6,000 home entertainment system, so I have to project myself into someone's shoes who can. But the projects that I was working on with the iPod, the Sound Dock products, like I felt like I was really designing for myself, and as a young designer, that made my job a lot easier. But I'm really proud of those products, and I love going to like Target and the Apple Store and like watching people use them. And
well, we have one solid smack fact this week.
Just one?
Yep, one. It took a lot of preparation. There are 34 museums in Boston and the surrounding area. Now, I may be wrong, but none of those are completely design related. So Design Museum Boston is unlike any other museum in Boston for its focus alone, but also for how it puts on the exhibits. Guys, what is Design Museum Boston, and why is it set up the way it is?
So yeah, Design Museum Boston, it's all in the name. We're a design museum in Boston. We're really focused. We're really focused on educating the public on the role of design in their lives, which is an absolutely huge role. You know, when we started the museum, we were like, you know, there's lots of different ways we could go with it. You know, the most traditional, of course, being that, you know, we'll get a building and we'll put exhibitions in that building, and, you know, we'll communicate to people that they should come to this building. But that just didn't feel right, especially when you think about design and the fact that it's all around us. You know, whether it's good or bad design, it's completely ubiquitous. Everywhere you look, everything is designed. And so instead of having that one building, that one space, what we've decided to do is have a distributed museum where we actually do exhibitions in retail spaces or public spaces or galleries. And we actually do a lot online as well, because that is the place where people are going to learn, is online. So we end up with this model of not just one space, but multiple spaces. And that's really congruent with design, again, because it's everywhere. So we're everywhere.
It's like a guerrilla museum. So Derek, how are you curating the work that goes into these exhibitions, and I mean, who all is involved in that, and what's the process like?
So we are very fortunate to have a great board of directors right now that help us sort of seek out the opportunities for exhibitions and help us really get to a nugget of a really good idea. And then we created a team of volunteers. We're almost an all volunteer organization right now. And we create a team of folks to come in and help us curate those individual exhibitions. So it's different every time. But it typically starts with our board, and it's comprised of some pretty heavy hitters in the Boston design scene.
Excellent. Well, that's a wrap.
Not yet.
Oh. No? More? Okay.
We'll be right back.
Adam O'Hearn of CADjunkie.com. I take it you're dancing like that for a reason. Kind of scary. You're excited about something there, little buddy? Indeed I am.
This week's CAD Junkie Q&A is brought to you by Fortis 3D Production Systems. Fortis systems produce accurate, durable prototypes and production-grade parts using high-performance thermoplastics. See it all at fortis.com. So today we're talking with Sam Aquillano and Derek Cascio of Design Museum Boston, and like some other designers I know, these guys are self-funding the project while working day jobs to keep the lights on. And Sam, I believe you're freelancing and teaching at the Massachusetts College of Art, MassArt, to pay the bills. Is that right? And if so, what's it like trying to juggle all these different things at once?
Well, yeah, actually, Derek and I both, I teach at MassArt, and Derek and I also teach at Wentworth Institute of Technology. Right. Yeah, so we're definitely juggling a lot. It keeps things interesting. I sort of have this theory of overlapping opportunities that I like to throw out there, and that's that all these different things that we do actually feed the other thing. So if I can just take you on a little walk here around the loop. So we teach industrial design, which gives us access to amazing facilities computers, software, and very willing volunteers who want extra credit.
Volunteers
right?
is the nice way to put it, right? It's like slave labor
Yes,
might be
so
another
they
way
volunteer.
to put it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So they volunteer for Design Museum Boston. We also get a lot of goodwill from being professors. So people are like, oh, these guys are professors. It makes them think that we know what we're talking about. So that's always good. And then we freelance, to keep the pencil sharp, obviously, to like make sure that we're in the game and we're experiencing this, which drives our teaching, which means our teaching is very relevant, and also our exhibitions are very relevant. And then as far as the museum is concerned, there's lots of benefits, but how it benefits our teaching is pretty obvious because we get to experience all these things and bring students to the exhibitions. But we also get a lot of goodwill on our freelance side from people who are like, oh, these two guys are like really making it happen. I got this job coming up. Maybe I should hire them to do some freelance work so they can actually survive. So it all kind of overlaps and somehow works. When everything lines up perfectly and all these deadlines come together, it can be a little nerve-wracking, but for the most part, it's good.
Well, so juggling is a big part of a startup. EVD is a self-funded startup as well, so we know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
We both have multiple full-time jobs in addition to doing this. So, but we hear a lot about other startups getting off the ground this way as well. Do you guys think that this work multiple jobs to make ends meet while you start your startup is a trend that's going to continue to grow over time? And if so, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to risk.
That's a good way to put it.
And I think, Derek and I wrestle with this all the time because, I think we're both of the feeling that nothing is ever going to grow at a convenient pace. But also you need to be able to eat.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a time, and there's very high growth businesses where you can take a giant risk and feel pretty good that you're going to, it's going to pay off. But I think a lot of these businesses that have been popping up and this entrepreneurial behavior that's happening now are for businesses that are really risky, and definitely a museum is not one where you're sort of like, oh, this is going to pay off. We're going to get rich. This is a sure thing. And I think a lot of like socially conscious businesses that are starting up, and a lot of the folks that we know are starting businesses that, especially when you're going to do a physical product, like it's very capital intensive, and it may not pay off in the end. So I think it is a trend. I'm happy the way that we've done it. We haven't taken on any debt. We're self-funded, but we also have the support of a lot of individual donors and patrons. So I think it's a healthy way. We really know the value of the dollar. And I think that's going to serve us well.
Well, tell me this. I mean, maybe just push it a little bit further and say, clearly you've thought about making this full-time. You've talked about how much you love it and you want it to be full-time, I think. Or do you? If you do want it to be full-time, how do you know when that happens? And if not, why not?
Well, yeah, I think making this a full-time endeavor is definitely something that we're focused on right now. And that's a big push for, over the last 6 months, we've really been focusing on how we can do that. The question of, when do you know when the right time to make it a full-time thing is, we've put the two pieces of paper together, and we said, this is how much we need, and this is how much we have. And once we hit that bare minimum number, that's when we can really make a substantial leap and not have to worry about taking on those other things. And it's definitely a significantly lower number than what we're used to. But
the world has changed to the point where you can work all these, call them gigs at the same time. And, the means of production and the, mobile office.
I was going to say, the technology
allows for it. So it's not as hard as, it maybe was in the past where people may have been like, I have to take this big risk and quit my job. We've been really fortunate to have employers that were like, we tell them we have this passion and we'd like to explore it. And they're like, all right, well, why don't, come on as a freelancer or a contractor and then we'll see how it goes from there. So I think we've been really lucky, but I do think, like you said, I think it is a trend.
So
it's particularly motivated by the economic state of today as well. It's easier for people to get a lot of part-time work or a lot of smaller gigs than regular full-time jobs, and I think that's played into that as well. So for us, we're pretty comfortable in that environment and know that if we have to do it, we can. So that's been an easier transition for us, I think, than for most folks.
So what's been the most challenging part of getting the museum off the ground?
One thing is funny is since it's a design museum and everything is designed, the amount of ideas is pretty much off.
It can be very overwhelming. Yeah.
So I think a big thing that's challenging, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but focus is a thing, because we really want to execute these ideas well. And I think we're doing that well. I think one of the challenges for both of us being designers is that, the day-to-day, like managerial, like budgets, we just did our taxes, fundraising, like sort of those things that we wish we could just be designing exhibitions and branding all the time. And I mean, that's part of the reason I'm back in school getting my MBA, is so that I can learn the skills that it's going to take to actually run the museum in the way that it needs to be run. Because I think we want to always be running this. I think having two designers run a design museum is pretty unique. It's not many times where you see like, an art museum is run by an artist or or whatever.
A historian of some kind.
Just exactly. It's a manager who's running the show, and you have curators who are designers. But we think there's a competitive advantage to having designers sort of at the executive level. So that's what we're working to fill in the gaps of our expertise.
Well, I definitely want to hear more about that, but first I'm going to have to take a little dance break.
That's all you, buddy. We'll wait. And welcome back. Today we're chatting with Sam Aquillano and Derek Cascio, co-founders and directors at Design Museum Boston. Where Sam and his business partner Derek are taking the most unique approach to showcasing design in Boston, or really any other part of the world we've seen.
As we've mentioned, Design Museum Boston,
or DMB,
isn't a building or a physical place at all. It's an organization that collaborates with other groups to host exhibitions all around Boston. We brought them on the show because, in a way, DMB is doing for museum exhibitions what the internet has done for design and engineering on the whole. It's allowing for a decentralized, partially crowdsourced approach to curation and exhibition design, as well as just keeping this museum running. So when you guys talk about Design Museum Boston, does that encompass engineering as well, or is Josh going to have to come down to Boston and start engineering Museum Boston as well?
Oh yeah, I will. I'll do it.
It absolutely encompasses engineering as well. I mean, I don't think you can talk about design and not include engineering. You guys should change the name of your show from Engineering vs. Designer to Engineering with Designer hugging each other.
It's a longer title, but I think it's catchy.
I think it can work on a couple different levels. But yeah,
it's
at Design Museum Boston,
subtext. We're working on it.
Yeah, we really think that everyone is creative, every single human being. It's a matter of like what level of creativity are you allowed to actually produce in your job. Engineers, oh my God, the amount of creativity is off the charts. So I think that we can't have an exhibition that talks about innovation and design and the future and not have it be sort of this combination of engineering and design.
Right on. So where did the idea of Design Museum Boston come from, and how did it become what it is?
Well, Sam and I, prior to starting Design Museum Boston, Sam and I were running the Boston chapter of IDSA, which is the Industrial Designers Society of America. And during that time, we noticed that there were a lot of other professional organizations that were talking to their own constituents and not really talking to one another. And none of them were really talking to the public. And so when we, during our time at IDSA, we met a lot of different folks, and we saw all of this kind of happening around us, and said, somebody should really be telling this story to the general public. That's a large audience, and there's a lot of designers in Massachusetts doing work. They should know about it. So we said, how are we going to do that? And we said, a museum would be a great way to do it. And we started looking for what it would take to raise a lot of money and open up a building, and realized that number was extremely high. And it was pretty much right in line with the peak of the recession. So like any good designers, we took those constraints and used them to our advantage, and took a look around and said, wow, there's a lot of empty storefronts as well. Why don't we just do exhibitions in there? Like designers, we're pretty stubborn. Yeah. And so we decided that that's going to be what we're going to do. And so we set out to talk to the right folks about putting the pieces in place to get an exhibition in a storefront, and ended up getting an exhibition at City Hall, which was pretty cool.
That was your first ever exhibition, was at City Hall?
Technically, it was our second.
That's right.
Our first exhibition was actually at Reebok headquarters at a conference for one day.
Okay.
Which was pretty cool, but it was definitely not as impactful as Creative Capital.
Well, I think that's such a cool thing that it's Design Museum Boston, right? And you do it at City Hall. It's just it's a great statement as well about the...
Absolutely, and we're going to continue to do exhibitions there into the future.
So you're collaborating with commercial design offices around the Boston area as well. How do you ensure that curation doesn't just become a bunch of self-promotion for the firms hosting the events?
Yeah, I mean, First and foremost, we get the guest curators who are sort of, they're experts in the industry, and the members of our board. And we definitely have a strict divide between sort of the fundraising arm of the organization and the content development arm. But overall, we actually want to be showing off what these firms and these designers are doing, because frankly, they're not doing it themselves. A lot of the public, if you were to walk up to someone and say, your sneakers were designed in Massachusetts, they would be like, what the hell are you talking about? And I think we sort of have this theory, I don't know how we test it, but there's this Puritan work ethic in Boston and New England that sort of says, like, and Adam, I know you've probably noticed it at Bose, but it's like, let's just work. We're going to stay within these walls. We're going to keep our nose to the grindstone. We're going to produce the most amazing design work the world's ever seen, but we're never going to talk to anyone about it. And that's sort of, they're doing themselves a disservice as a company, but I think they're doing the public a disservice from sort of the educational impact that some of this work can have. So we do want to show it off, and I think we try to do that in the most ethical way possible. But in the end, it's about showing off. It's about showing the public all this amazing work and how it affects them and how good design can improve our lives.
A lot of aspects to DMB, right? You're teaching the public about design, but you guys are actually teaching students, and you talked about it a little bit, exhibiting their displays around town, right?
Yeah. I think we've had exhibitions we had a student program that we ran at Wentworth that was called Studio. We actually worked with the students, and they designed the entire exhibition. They came up with the content, they did the fundraising, and we lent our expertise to help them realize that vision. And that actually went up at the Prudential Center for 2 weeks, and that'll be moved to a new location. So you talk about having a real life design experience at a student level that then gets shown off to 250,000 people. That's not something that a lot of schools can provide, and not something that a lot of organizations can provide outside of school. So for us, that was a great experience because it helped us sort of hone some of the things that we were developing at the time. It helped us really make sure that our tool sets that we were using would work in that kind of environment, because it's something that, as an organization that uses a lot of volunteers, it's something that's really important for us to do to make sure that we can nimbly expand teams and teach larger groups of students down the line. And that's a program that we actually want to roll out to more institutions beyond Wentworth in the coming years. Now,
I'm just curious, you guys, you're both professional industrial designers dealing with the pro industrial design world, on the high level. Do you have any interest in working with the maker community at all? We have a lot of maker listeners on this show. And if so, or if not, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, the amount of ideas for exhibitions and for educational programs is off the charts. And the whole DIY and maker community and everything, like that homegrown design. You could produce a giant exhibition about all that amazing work and sort of the cultural themes that are driving it. That's something I would love to do.
All right.
And we try to tap into that ourselves, when it comes to how do we do things inexpensively? How do we do things so that we can, make it ourselves? Because, money is a hurdle. We try to tap into that as much as we can in that community, just to see what we can do to make that go easier for us. Very inspirational.
So if you guys had one piece of advice to leave with somebody who's got a great big idea on the scale of a museum, but they're afraid it's unachievable, what advice would that be?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I could tell someone is that if you're doing it on your own, you're doing it the wrong way. You cannot, Derek and I together, I think, is probably the biggest part of our success. You can't just have one person thinking you can kind of take on these big things. You need someone that you can trust, that is of the same mind and willing to take the same risks. And luckily, we have each other. And that, I think, has just been huge. So my biggest piece of advice is go find a co-founder and give them a big hug. And
Engineer versus Designer group hug. We're going to change the name of the show and everything. Yeah. Believe it or not, that is all the time that we have, friends. Sam and Derek, having you guys on the show has been even better than that time Josh showed off his salsa moves with a cardboard cutout of Liza Minnelli. Thanks so much for being on the show with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
If you would like to send dangerous ethnic dance moves to EVDHQ, please don't.
Engineer vs. Designer appreciates your comments. If you listen to the show and wish somebody would bang on our skulls with wiffle ball bats, head over to EngineerVsDesigner.com. and whiffle away.
And if you want to see us jump out the window in a pathetically misguided attempt at human flight, be sure to like us, +1 us, tweet us, or whatever else us, as social media has been correlated with convincingly stunning CGI and excitement.
This show is edited by Simon Martin. Our theme music is by Ross Hartman.
We'll see you next week, and remember, without engineers, designers would cover the world in matching layers of handle samples.
And without designers, engineers would get away with painting everything gunmetal gray.
A production of EVD Media.